So, welcome to Earth Live, a brand new webcast featuring interviews of those people working on the front lines of conservation. And today we're joined by Jamie Lowe, Chief Executive of the National Native Title Council from Australia. How are you doing, Jamie?
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And can you just briefly tell us what it is that you do?
Yeah, so I'm the CEO of the national advocacy body, National Native Title Council. In Australia, we have native title recognition, and traditional owners or First Nations people go through a process to gain their native title. So I'm an Aboriginal man from down the south of Australia. So we help lobby and advocate for First Nations people's rights.
Okay, and so obviously speaking to you today about the kind of tragic situation that's happened at Duke Gorge. Can you tell us a little bit more about that site, why it's special, and what's happening?
Yeah, so Australia is an ancient land. We know it as Australia today, but the Indigenous history dates back over 80,000 years here, and there's some extremely significant kind of not only sites that are sacred to First Nations people, but on a worldwide significance, global significance as well. So the Duke Gorge site, and it's interesting because First Nations people just know it as a special site. They don't have carving, dating instruments, etc. Until someone gets out there, an archaeologist gets out there and starts carving, dating, areas, it gets kind of just labelled this 46,000-year-old site. The mob didn't know that; they just know it's been there forever. And so this site, in anyone's language, of dating back 46,000 years is significant. It's evidence of civilization before the Ice Age, one of its only of its kind in the world. I think if we compare it to other sites which of global significance, I think the pyramids are about 5,000 years old, Stonehenge, those type of places, which we all know about. And the sites that take back 40 plus thousand years that we don't know about. So that's a thing. So there's been plaited hairs found in this site which date back 5,000 years. So it's quite a special place.
It sounds it. And so what's happened then? So Rio Tinto, what's occurred?
So Rio Tinto. So the Pilbara, for those listeners who don't know, it's quite a unique place, not only in Australia and the world, and a lot of iron ore. There's a lot of mining that takes place there. It's a pocket within Australia in WA, and Aboriginal cultural heritage in this country just isn't valued as it should be. Rio Tinto and other mining companies are running around kind of blowing up Aboriginal cultural heritage on a regular basis. And so in this instance, they had negotiations with the First Nations people over there to have a license to mine. But they didn't disclose that they had various other options on this particular site. The First Nations people there said, we don't want you to go there. Rio Tinto said, we've got the license and under law we can go there. And they did, and they blew the place up. So 46,000 years of history has been blown up in a single swipe.
That's unbelievable, and not to sound too dramatic, but it reminds me of when ISIL in Iraq, when they were going around destroying these places of significant cultural heritage. The international condemnation that happened with that was incredible. And did they know that they were? So it wasn't an accident. That they knew what they were doing.
They knew. They 100% knew about it. There's now been a national inquiry into the incident, and in their evidence, so they've disclosed that they did know about it. They've disclosed that they had other options which they didn't disclose to the traditional owners of that country, the First Nations people, and they still decided to go ahead and do it. So we have to ask the question of whether it be Australian citizens or other citizens, why wouldn't they value a site of such significance? So there's a values question there. So not only from an executive level, but the people that are kind of putting the explosives in the ground knew of this site, but there was still a decision, a dollar decision made that they'd still go ahead with it.
Okay, and so what was your first reaction when you found out? What was your initial approach to Rio Tinto?
Yeah, we feel sadness for the people over there. for a number of reasons. Not only they're losing such a significant site for their people that's been there forever, and the stories that could tell their young people, and so that's gone now. So you feel a sadness, you feel anger, you feel disappointed, and I guess unfortunately it's not a new thing here in Australia. It happens, as I said, on a regular basis, and then until us as a nation kind of come to terms with our Indigenous history, I think it will. I think it will continue to happen, and it just kind of speaks to the power imbalance with First Nations people, and I guess general broader kind of government and power within this country as well.
And so, what was Rio Tinto's response to you guys?
Well, the response initially was fell short. They ran their own internal board-led review, and so there's no senior executives, First Nations people on a high level, at board level, to actually kind of keep that review to account. So there's some outcomes that came out of that, and I guess the kind of what made headlines last week was the I'm not sure if they called it determination. I think they said that he walked, but Jacques-Sébastien, the CEO of Rio Tinto, and some other executives have now will be leaving as a result of the incident. So that's an outcome, we think, but there still needs to be a significant cultural shift within Rio so these incidents don't occur again.
And so, could you take us through what actually led to the ousting of these executives? So, I understand that the investors came together to lobby.
Yeah, so a number of pension funds or super funds here in Australia came together and supported the movement of, we were calling for change. First Nations people around the country were calling for change. And we were supported then by these the investors as well. So a number of those got on board, which has probably been unprecedented. I've been working in and dealing with this space, with my people for a very long time, and I think that the corporate sector and the investors were critical in kind of making change happen. So we welcome that our allies in our fight.
And I understand the value of the iron ore underneath the cave was valued at $132 million. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. I think it was 135 mil. That was the value of it. So there was obviously just a dollar decision made. 46,000 years of history, or $135 million worth of iron ore, and it's a pretty clear decision that what Rio made.
Yeah, and so what's next? Are the communities going to receive compensation from Rio Tinto?
Well, we'd hope that there's some reparations there. So that will be an ongoing fight and battle, I would imagine, as well. You'd have to think that Rio Tinto not disclosing other options and the full suite of advice that they had, you'd have to wonder whether they had breached their agreement which they had with the First Nations people of that area as well. There's also a fight to change the laws within not only the nation but within the state of Western Australia. So there's further law protection around Aboriginal cultural heritage as well. So there's some of the points. So there needs to be an internal structure change within Rio Tinto, but there's a lot of other mining companies within Australia as well, which are doing similar things. So we need law reform to actually protect it.
And I understand that the government has called for the next chief executive to be an Australian national. Do you think so they have more respect for local cultural heritage? Is that something that you agree with?
Well, yeah, I think that's critical. 75% of Rio Tinto's profits comes out of the Pilbara, so that gives you some sort of kind of idea of the billions of dollars that have actually coming out of this region. Other large mining companies, BHP also has a large footprint in the Pilbara as well, and with Rio Tinto, their head office is in London. Yeah. So for them to make decisions where 75% of their profit is coming from one region, which is in Australia, and they're doing, all their business decisions within London, I think we have a thing here. It's called the pub test. You ask someone in the pub, and they say if that's right or not. Wouldn't pass the pub test. So I think that I think it just makes a lot more sense to have more Australian executives, CEO and a board level, and also First Nations people at a board level as well.
And what advice would you give to other Indigenous communities around the world that are facing a similar battle?
We've connected with other Indigenous communities that are doing the same. I know the Apache, St. Carlos over there are fighting fights with Rio Tinto. We know in Papua New Guinea, Bougainville, and other pockets within Australia, First Nations people. So we're hopefully to connect. So because there's similar stories, and we're in isolation. It's a pretty big place, the globe. But I guess over these mechanisms, Zoom and other kind of instruments that we can connect and kind of share our stories, so we can actually have not only a nation movement, but more of a global movement of further protection of Indigenous heritage.
Okay, and my very last question is, what else would you like to see done as a result of this? What kind of changes?
Well, I think that we need jurisdiction of our own lands. Australia doesn't have treaties with their First Nations people, so we don't actually have jurisdiction, have a say over our own country. So we've been calling for Australia to negotiate treaties with the First Nations people for a long time now, so that needs to happen. Because we just kind of keep on chipping away at isolated kind of pieces of law reform. I think that's a pretty long fight, and fight that's you get only small wins. So we need treaties, and we need Indigenous rights to be recognised.
Okay, Jamie, well, thank you very much for your time today, and good luck to you and the Aboriginal people of Australia.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Bye-bye.